Here we are. Oh, Hare Krishna. Welcome. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Vimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Golavani Kushavani Nikushisha Srinivani Paschata Vishitari. Would you like to join us for class?
Yeah, I didn't know.
Here you can meditate, but you can meditate over here.
Okay.
Coming behind is too much.
It's not that bad out. Just kind of bad.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I already did Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, for me, okay. I got the one with the ribbon. I
Oh, okay.
It's so silly, huh?
Hare Krishna. She painted it. I can't believe it.
Oh, this?
Yes.
That's new.
Yesterday.
No,
Oh.
she painted it today.
Today?
Yes. She wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, but
She's quite the artist, isn't she?
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, but bright?
Yeah, too bright.
Huh?
Too much bright.
The blue,
Yep.
I agree. Yeah, it needs to be toned.
It's a big toning job now. All this. Please have a seat over here.
Thank you. And excuse me, I maybe have to leave in around 15 minutes. Is it okay?
You have to leave when? In 15 minutes?
Yeah, is it
That's
okay
okay.
to leave? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, just didn't want to be rude.
Hare Krishna. This is not one of the way books. This is a new brand of book. Let me have one of those. You can have this one. Because that's, you'll see, it's fresh. What we use too new. Can you get a sheet? You know what a sheet's on?
Oh, yes.
You know the words. Not yet. Get two of them. Now, Marcy, are you keeping track of where we are? Yeah. We went through simplicity. We're in the middle of
We're
540.
in the middle of,
We're on page 540, right in the middle.
yeah, we're going to cleanliness.
Yes.
Yes? Correct?
Yes, for him and for her.
What page?
We're in 538, 540.
Are we going to change?
We're going to chant again.
Oh, again.
Yeah, but just without repetition.
Okay.
Jaya Radha Madhava. Not on the ground, please. No. Sacred words never go on here. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopijana Vallabha Giridhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Giridhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janarandana Yashodanandana Vraja Janarandana Yamuna Tira Vanchari Yamuna Tira Vanchari Jaya Radha Madhava Sundari Hari. Jai Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Purvikacharya Struktura Shishimad Divine Grace Shila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON VPT Pandaracharya Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Purvikacharya Struktura Shishimad. The Divine Grace Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the Son of the devotees. All glories to the Son of the devotees. All glories to the Son of the devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 On this 13th day of March 2018 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in chapter 13 entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness, and we'll read the Sanskrit on page 537 for 38 and the translation, and then we'll go to the portion of the purport where we are. It's a long verse. Okay, ready? Amanitvamadam vidvam Ahimsa Chantar Arjavam Acharyopasanam Shaucham Stharyamathmavaningraha Indriyarteshu Vairagyam Anahankarevacha Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshana Darshanam Asaktira Vishvanga Putra Dhara Brahadishu Nityam Cha Samachittatvam Ishtanishtopapatishu Maichananya Yogena Bhaktiradha Vicharini Viviktadesha Sevitvam Adatir Jana Samsadi Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam Eta Jnanamati Proktam Adjnanam Yadatonyata. Translation: humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be, is ignorance. So we have read part of this report, and now we will continue on page 540, fourth paragraph down, cleanliness. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are two kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External cleanliness means taking a bath. But for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process cleans the accumulated dust of past karma from the mind. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. And self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. This is real renunciation. The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. One should not cater to these demands, which are not necessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit so that one can discharge his duty in advancing in spiritual life. The most important and uncontrollable sense is the tongue. If one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses. The function of the tongue is to taste and to vibrate. Therefore, by systematic regulation, the tongue should always be engaged in tasting the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna. As far as the eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna. That will control the eyes. Similarly, the ears should be engaged in hearing about Krishna, and the nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service, and it is understood here that the Bhagavad Gita is simply expounding the science of devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Bhagavad Gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no other subject in the Bhagavad Gita than devotional service. False ego means accepting this body as oneself. When one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. Ego is there. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. In the Vedic literature, the Dravida Prabhu Upanishad 1.4.10, it is said, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. This sense of I am is ego, but when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. When the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. There are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. We ought, of course, to give up the false identification with the body. Om Jnana Timarambasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unvidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So Krishna is systematically answering the questions that Arjuna posed at the beginning of this chapter. This chapter 13 begins, obviously, the final 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, but it's important to realize that the Gita has 3 natural divisions. First 6 chapters, middle 6 chapters, and final 6 chapters. Srila Prabhupada has said that the middle 6 chapters are the most important, and they all deal pretty much exclusively with devotional service. Now, in the beginning of this 13th chapter, there is much that has already been dealt with that he's going to expound upon. For instance, the three modes of material nature, the difference between the soul and the body. These have been dealt with or touched upon in previous chapters, but now he's going into more detail. So Arjuna asks this question at the beginning of the chapter. Dear Krishna, please explain to me what is knowledge, what is the goal of knowledge, what is the Purusha and the Prakriti, and what is the Chaitra and the Chaitragya. Now these terms need some definition. The Purusha and Prakriti refer to the material energy and the enjoyer of the material energy. The Purusha in this context means the spirit soul who's trying to dominate and enjoy this material energy. Now there's some overlap because Chaitra and Chaitragya refers to Chaitra being the body, the field of activity. Our senses and our mind, all of this is our field of activity. And the Chaitragya is the knower of the body. Each one of us is a knower of our own body. We don't know each other's bodies so well as we know our own body. And then Krishna makes it clear, I am also the knower in everybody, as the super soul. So every one of us is an individual soul, and each of us has the same super soul expansion of Krishna within our hearts. And then what is knowledge and the goal of knowledge? So Krishna's answered the first two sections here, what is Chaitya Chaitya, and what is the Prakriti of Purusha. And now he's answering what is knowledge, and he will also answer the goal of knowledge. So he has this list of 20 items here, and which we read the translation. And now Srila Prabhupada is systematically explaining each one of them. So he's beginning with Shaucham, which is the, where is Shaucham? Shaucham is in the first verse, Acharya Upasanam Shaucham, that's where he took up. So cleanliness is essential for making advancement. So cleanliness, as Srila Prabhupada explained, has these two aspects, the external and internal cleanliness. They work together. If one is pure at heart and pure in mind and virtuous, he'll be in the mode of goodness. He won't want to live in a dirty place. If you move into an apartment, if you clean it up and you keep it clean, you actually do the laundry and you don't want to get dirty. In other words, there's a certain mode of nature. That's cleanliness. Now that's not in and of itself a spiritual activity, but it helps the mind to be calm, to understand these subject matters, and to be receptive to the message. But more important than that is the internal cleanliness. If one is internally clean, then he'll naturally be externally clean. And that, Prabhupada says, means thinking of Krishna, cultivating Krishna consciousness, chiefly through sound vibration, the holy name. And like we just vibrated these Bhagavad Gita verses. Prabhupada explained each of these verses in the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, they're like mantras in and of themselves. One can repeat them, and especially if you meditate on the meaning, and it goes very deep and it purifies. So that's why Srila Prabhupada took all this trouble to provide us with what's called the transliteration, which is the phonetic rendering of the original Devanagari, and the meaning of each word. It greatly increases the size of the book. But Srila Prabhupada was very eager that we learn some of these verses, especially the leading verses. So the Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna consciousness can be understood simply as a process of purification. Simply as a process. Our distance that we have artificially placed between ourselves and Krishna is a function of our impurities that we have allowed to enter into our mind, and we're living on that basis. And the first impurity is the idea that we can somehow be separate from God and exploit and dominate this material nature. That's unnatural for the soul. And everything flows from that original activity, that turning away from Krishna, from God. And we come to inhabit various material bodies which are not us. Prabhupada talks about the false ego, because that's one of the qualities. Anahankara. Ahankara is the Sanskrit word, that's in the second verse. Ahankara means literally, I'm the doer. That's what ahankara means. I'm the independent doer. Anahankara is just the opposite. The prefix an in Sanskrit is just like non or this in English. So how to come to that point? Because we're so habituated to acting on this false ego platform. If someone asks who you are, you give some, well, I'm from here, I speak this language, here's my parents, here's my last name, here's my first name, height, weight, whatever. And all of those things pertain just to this body. But we're not the body. That's the first lesson. Aham Brahmasmi. We read that. I remember in the ashram way back when I joined in the early 70s, this was one of the phrases that we would learn. Aham Brahmasmi. And that identifying oneself as spirit, not matter, is the first step, an essential step in God realization and self-realization. Self-realization means you're trying to understand yourself, or who is that self? It's not the body. And so the body is seen as two things. One is a kind of an anchor or restriction on the soul, but also as a tool, especially the human body, by which we can cure the soul of its material disease and false ego and make this our last body. There seemed to be a lot more talk about going home back to God back in the early days. We were confident that we were old and do it. It's not so easy. But progress can be made, especially in this human body. So it's cleanliness, purification of the senses, purification of the mind, purification of the intelligence by the process of devotional service. Then the next quality in the list here is starya. Starya means steadiness. And this is one of the qualities mentioned especially in the Upadeshamrita. Upadeshamrita means nectarian, the nectar of instructions. And it's very, very concise. This book was written in Sanskrit by a great Acharya, Rupa Goswami. There's only 11 verses, but they're meant for the serious practitioner. And he describes there things favorable and things unfavorable to devotional service. So one of the things, the verse describing what's favorable, he says, Utsaham nishtayad dharyat tat karma bhavartanat sangat yagat sato vrittesha viprasiddhiti. So the first quality there is enthusiasm. If we understand the process of devotional service, we understand the basic philosophy, we have our relation to Krishna, which is a very blissful one. You can't break it, you can only forget it, so we want to revive it. Well, the first thing is enthusiasm, because it's going against the grain of our conditioning. Each of us in this material world has been through so many different bodies, so many different experiences, millions of years, that it's, our mind is very conditioned to be in this separate state from Krishna. But with superior intelligence, when we come in contact with this actual knowledge and a realized soul who can instruct us, then we get the idea that we can have, and the example of how we can live a different kind of life and actually overcome this illusion that we've been in for so long. But it's very, you need a lot of determination. They just had, I didn't follow it, but you can't get away from it. They just had these Winter Olympics, right? Whenever the Olympics come along, you know, it's in the ether, it's all over the place. So one of the things we can get from it, you know, is that these individuals who actually get to go to the Olympics, they're winnowed from thousands and thousands of others who aspire but don't quite make it right. So what's the difference? There's of course the aptitude and the determination and the quality of their training, and all of these different things go together that they make the grade of actually going to the Olympics. We want to speak of winning one of the Olympics. But it's a good example of how anything that you want to achieve that's rare or difficult, you need determination to overcome so many difficulties. Your own lack of confidence, different things may come up. In athletics, there's always an injury possibility and all these different things. Everyone knows that. So the same thing holds true in spiritual life. We are trying to train our mind to think in a certain way that's practically 180 degrees different from what we've always done. Instead of being proud, instead of being the enjoyer and the controller and the exploiter, we want to be humble servants, always thinking of the welfare of others and always trying to please Krishna and the spiritual master. Now from the outside, this looks like, are you kidding me? You know, where's the fun in that? You're not making any money? You're not accumulating bank account? You know, what's going on? That's not for me. You know, and the four regular principles, controlling the senses, controlling the sex life, all these things. But when you come in contact with the knowledge and you get the seed of devotion, it has to be in contact with the devotee, you get inspired to practice. First comes a little faith, from contact, from reading, from understanding, from oftentimes going through some difficulty in the material world. As Krishna says, there's four kinds of pious people who come to me. The first one is the arta, one who's distressed in some way. Oftentimes people look for solace. People come here just to get away from the madhouse out there, you know, where everyone's trying to exploit you. Come here, come to the Hare Krishna, sit, see the deities, take a little prasad, chant. You know, it's kind of an oasis just on that level. So that's fine. But then there needs to be that beginning of faith in the process, to the point where you associate and begin chanting. Bhajana Kriya. There's wonderful two verses, Rupa Goswami, the same Rupa Goswami wrote, and he says, Adar Shraddha Tataksaru Sangha Bhajana Kriya. So those are the three first steps. First, a little faith, enough to come to the temple or associate, open the book, and then associate with devotees and begin the process of devotional service. This is also devotional service, just hearing Bhagavad Gita. This is a very important part of it. But then, if one is serious, he takes it up regulation, regular chanting, wants to get initiated, and then there's this process. It can go on for lifetimes, or it can be very short, depending on your determination, your steadiness, of anartha nivritti. Artha is something you want, something of value. It oftentimes means money. But the real artha, which we call the sva-artha, or the goal of the soul, what is really the best for the soul, that's what we're talking about here. So anartha, the thing, are things that are impediments to the soul getting purified. So nivritti means negation. So the process of negating or cleansing away the anarthas in the heart, the unwanted desires, unwanted habits, all of these different things that are accumulated for lifetimes together. But the process of devotional service is practiced assiduously, is so powerful that quickly you can become, get rid of tons of anarthas and come to the point of nishta, which is steadiness. Now this word nishta has the word sta in it, which is similar to starya, which is what we're talking about here. So Rupa Goswami, in his other book, Upadeshamrita, he says, Utsahan nishtayad taryat, enthusiasm and determination and patience, while doing the work of the devotional service, chanting and serving and doing all the regulations, whatever you can do. That's called tat karma pavartana. So if one is enthusiastic, if you're not enthusiastic, you can't accomplish anything, material or spiritual. But you also have to be determined and patient that the end will come. It's very scientific, genius. So that's more or less what starya is, maintaining your enthusiasm and your determination and to overcome all the obstacles that Maya is going to put in your way, that the material energy put in your way. Mostly coming from inside. Doubts, confusion, laziness, like that. So this starya is very important. As Bhagavad mentioned, steadiness means one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. So that gives that. And then the next one is self-control, which is atma vinigraha. This is essential. Krishna says in the third chapter, at the end, it's all about karma yoga, acting for Krishna and giving the fruits. But at the end, Arjuna says, well, what is it that forces one to act? Is it by, unless it gets one's will to do the wrong thing? Atakena prayukto yam papam charati purusha anichanna vivarshanaya bhalari vinayojita. Anicca means you don't want to. Someone who's deeply addicted to like tobacco or alcohol. I used to smoke when I was a kid. Thank God I never got beyond one pack a day. I never reached that platform. But it was just a thing to do. People grow up, I grew up in the 50s and the early 60s, everybody smoked. So, but it's just, it's just crazy. It doesn't make any sense, but that everyone's doing it. So it has a hold on you. Even though I'm having more trouble climbing the stairs, I know it's not good for me, And eventually they broke through the corporate veil of, disinformation and bad propaganda. They're paying the doctors to get in Life magazine say, there's no proof, absolute proof that cigarettes are harmful to your health. Right. So eventually, on every package, suddenly we find each package has a little warning, cigarette smoking is hazardous to your health. And they kept changing the warning, it can kill your unborn baby, whatever. But despite the warning, despite all that, still people smoke. Still, it's decreased in America. Now maybe 15% of people still smoke. It's getting less. But why? Because it has a grip on you. It overcomes your intelligence. So this self-control. So Krishna says at the end of that third chapter, Arjuna asks the question, what engages one? And he says, kama. Kama esha krodha esha. Lust, powerful desire. Which, when frustrated, turns to anger. This is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. And it covers one in different degrees. Like, the least covering is the smoke covering fire. You can see some of the fire there. Greater covering is the dust on a mirror. You can't even see your face, but vaguely. And then the biggest covering is the child in the womb. Can't see any light. It gives these analogies. So it covers one's knowledge. Then he says, how does it do it? Indriyani mano buddhi rasya. Within one's senses, mind and intelligence, lust takes over and covers your intelligence. This is how, these strategic points. Hare Krishna. Please return, sir. We'll see you. So, Indriyani put it, so then he says, Tasmat tvamani anyado, niyam yavadatashiva. Therefore, Arjuna, in the beginning, control these senses. Tasmat tvamani niyam yavadatashiva, papanam pradiheyam jnana vijnananashana. And thus conquer this enemy known as lust, which is covers the knowledge and realization of every living entity. So that's like a basic principle of any yoga process. How to do it? Well, this is Kali Yuga. You know, the senses are difficult to control. There's a nice verse praying where Prabodhananda Saraswati, one of our great acharyas, he prays to Lord Chaitanya. Kala kalir balana indriya vaidi varga, she bhakti marga here kanta kakoti runa. Oh my dear Lord, it is the Kali Yuga, and my senses, my enemies have gotten completely out of control. Balana indriya vaidi varga. And the Bhakti Marga is overgrown by the path of Bhakti Marga. Bhakti Marga means the path of devotional service. Is overgrown by the weeds and brambles of false philosophy and misguiding bogus yogis and everything like that. So in this situation, then I'm helpless. So it says, Bhakti Marga Kantakoti, Ha Kuyami Begalakka Mahankarovi Chaitanya Chandiri Karoshi. Where shall I go? What can I do, O Lord Chaitanya, if you don't show me your mercy right now? Well, Lord Chaitanya has shown all of us his mercy. He's given us the process by which you control the senses, beginning with the chanting of the holy name. And the prasadam, to control the tongue, the most voracious and uncontrollable. So controlling the senses means not just repressing them, but engaging them in the service of Krishna. We can see the beautiful form of the deity, we can taste the prasadam, we can hear the wonderful Hare Krishna mantra and songs about Krishna. And you know, every sense has its proper function. If we're determined to advance, we do that. And gradually, the purification takes place, and the senses are no longer attracted. I mean, I can't even imagine smoking a cigarette, not even a joint. You know, there's no attraction. It's gone. Whereas at one point, I had to. I was impelled. So that's what every devotee experiences. And, let's see. The next quality, Atma Vinigraha. So then, I think that's as far as we read. Yes. Accepting things favorable and rejecting things unfavorable. This is the basic principle of self-control. And then, yeah, I think we read that. Are we on page 541, the false ego? Is that it? Okay, let's read that too. False ego means accepting this body as oneself. When one, because the next quality is anahankara. Yeah. Indriyarteshu vairagya. We also spoke about that, of being detached from the attraction of the senses. But anahankara, we're talking about that. False ego means false ego. That's ahankara, but anahankara is just the opposite. False ego means accepting the body as oneself. When one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. Ego is there. We read that too. Right? Aham brahmasmi. One should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, old age, disease, and death. Janma mrityu jadadhyaya dukkha doshana darshana. That's the whole second line of the text number 9. Okay, very important one. There are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb of the mother, its suffering, etc., are all very graphically described. And we're reading that in the morning, if anyone's interested. Right in the morning, we're in that chapter, in chapter 31 of the 3rd canto of Lord Kapila's teaching to his mother, Devhuti. Amazing. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful. Because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother, we do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed. And as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased, and no one wants to become old, but there's no avoiding these. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. Okay, so I'll just finish on these. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Dosha, and Adarshana. This is like so many times, probably just quote that one line. There's a tremendous capacity in the spirit soul for denial, for forgetting and denial. This forgetfulness and denial is something that's given to us by Krishna when we want to forget Him. As he says in the 15th chapter, 15th verse, Sarva Chaha Bridisam Nivishto Matta Smritir Jnanam Apohanamcha. That I am situated as the super soul in everyone's heart. And from me come knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So, Krishna, he understands us better than we understand ourselves. He knows what we want. The fact that we wanted to be independent, well, He's given us this environment, this material world, where we can convince ourselves that we're independent, although we're not actually independent. You can be independent because we're linked up to Krishna as the energy is linked up to the sun. Can the sunshine be independent of the sun? Doesn't make any sense. So our constitutional position eternally is to be energy, not the source of energy or the enjoyer. But in the human form, we have the opportunity to exploit and try to enjoy this material energy. And so if we want that, meaning we want to forget Krishna, we want to be independent, then we're given this world and the different bodies in which we can convince ourselves that we're doing that for some time. But then comes the big shock. You can't actually have any steady enjoyment here. Whether one is a big leader or a multi-millionaire or billionaire, or is someone just struggling on the street to get his next meal, you're still in the grip of time. And that grip of time is pushing you toward death. The billionaire will be separated from his billions, and the wino will be separated from his wine bottle. It doesn't make any difference. And everyone was equal. And then your fate is determined by higher authorities according to what you did in that lifetime. It very well be that the poor guy in the street who doesn't really have an opportunity to hurt anybody, except himself, is going to be in a better position than the billionaire who's funding wars and doing so many things. Everything counts. It all counts. There's no getting away with it. So the real problems of life are Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi. Are this birth, old age, disease, and death. I like to put them in the order as they come: birth, old age, disease, inevitably, and death. And then the cycle over again. And we should know for sure that it's not just the human form. This human form is a rare gift. It's such a tragedy. This is why Prabhupada saw the urgency. All the millions and billions of human beings. And only a handful are even thinking a little bit along the lines of these ways, thinking philosophically about life. Lord Chaitanya, when he began his teaching to Rupa Goswami, he started with that. He says that, there's so many human beings, but of them, there are only a few who are regulated, and only a few of those who follow the Vedic injunctions strictly. And only a few of those really are actually self-controlled. Most are just faking it. You go down, down, down until it's a very small number who are receptive to this real knowledge and determined to actually act on it. So it's a small group, but we should understand we can become part of that group. Doesn't matter what our background is. This is the wonderful ecumenical, merciful quality of Krishna consciousness. Is that it doesn't matter whatever you did. Everyone is eligible. All it takes is, as we mentioned, a little faith, a little determination to investigate the process and begin chanting Hare Krishna. Absolutely free, doesn't cost anything. There is no hard and fast rule. As Lord Chaitanya says, Nam Nam Akani Bahudani Sarva Shaktis. Tatrapitani Amitak Smarane Nakava. He said, my dear Lord, you're so merciful. Now he's himself Krishna, but he's in the role of a devotee, so he's praising Krishna. And he's taking the role in this verse as an unfortunate soul who is reluctant to chant. So he says, my dear Lord, Krishna, You have many different names. Krishna, Govinda, and Keshava too. Your names have no end, and in each of them you have invested your potencies, leaving none out. These are Sarva Shakti. And so, in other words, the holy name is non-different from Krishna himself. And there's no hard and fast rules. He says right there in the verse, there's no restriction as to time or place or candidate. He uses the word time, but it stands for all of it. So it's completely open. But I'm so foolish that I'm reluctant to chant. I have no taste for chanting. And that's because we're covered by the modes of nature due to our attempt, our doomed attempt, life after life, to try to enjoy this world. So with that understanding, if we have a little faith, then we can enter into the next verse. Trinada Pisuni Chena, to be a little humble, and tolerant of this world, and to praise others and not want any praise for ourselves, and to chant in that mood, one can actually quickly get a taste. Krishna sees that humble attitude, and he gives you a taste for the chanting. The most valuable thing that you can have, millions and billions of dollars aren't even worth a fraction of it, is a desire to chant the holy name. That's it. Whether it's a determination, I'll chant even though I don't, I'm not getting any pleasure out of it, I'll chant because it's my duty, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, which is a good platform to be on. Or you're actually getting, some of the natural taste. That's why it's so nice to hear the glories of the holy name, spoken by those who realize its actual value. Like so many verses, this Kevalashtika, 8 verses about the holy name. Actually, I discovered fairly recently that these 8 are 8 out of 100 that were written by this author that we didn't know who it was too recently, until Sukhi Bhakta, who very likely goes to Vrindavan and India, and he learns things that I never knew. And he found out who the actual author was. So somebody pulled these out as the most impressive. So the first one is Mararam Maradevyopi Mangaledyopi Mangalam. Pavanam Pavanebhyopi Hare Namaya Kevalam. Now that last line is from another verse, the famous verse of Lord Chaitanya, heard from Ishwara Puri, and he used it when he was preaching the Prakashana of the Saraswati. It's often the first verse devotees memorize because it's so easy. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam. Hello, Nasteva, Nasteva, Nasteva Gatalanyata. All that the repetition makes it easy to memorize. So what this verse means is that Hare Nama, the chanting of the holy name, chanting of the holy name, chanting of the holy name. When you repeat something, it's great emphasis. When you say 3 times, it's like the most important thing you can say. So this is by Narada Muni, Briha Naradiya Purana. So he says, forgive me, I'm going to give you my own poem. If you want to achieve the supreme goal of life in this age when dissension and chaos abound, it's Kali Yuga, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way that can ever be found. But to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name with a stout-hearted vow. And to pray, O Lord Krishna, O friend of the poor, that my head ever unto your lotus feet bow. So, now, our author of this Kevalashtika took that last line and he made it the refrain of his verses. So, his verse goes, of sweet things, it's the sweetest you will taste at any time. Of things that bring good fortune, it's the perfect paradigm. Of all of things that purify, it purifies most powerfully. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. Now, how is it all that be? Because the holy name of Krishna is not different from Krishna, and there's nothing in existence that is outside of Krishna. Everything is either Krishna directly or his energies. So therefore, the holy name is everywhere and everything. To realize that, not so easy. But there are so many verses on Kali is so sweet. Well, I don't taste it that way. How is it so sweet? Yes, because as Rupa Goswami says in his Upadeshamrita, our tongues are covered by the bile of ignorance. He has a verse like that. He says, Syat Krishna Nama Charitari Sitapya Vidya Pito Pratapta Rasavasa Rojikana. Kinta Kitvararada Nuninam Kalusaiva Jishta Svadi Kraman Bhavanitan Kanabula Hantri. He says the holy name form qualities of Krishna are sweet as anything. But we can't taste it like that because our tongues are covered by the bile of ignorance. Just like you get hepatitis and you get jaundice and you can't taste sugar as sweet. I had that experience when I had a serious case of hepatitis in 1969, just about the time of the moonshot.
in July of '69. And I'm sitting lying in the bed there watching the moonshot and not tasting anything that's sweet. I tasted it. And gradually, I was cured, and the sweetness comes back. So it's not the sugar that's or the sweet thing that's the fault, it's your tongue. Okay? Similarly, the holy name is sweet for the devotees. They can chant for hours and just be completely blissful, you know. And we can get a little taste of that, you know. So we should know, well, we should try to cultivate it more and more, so that's, you know. I'll give you my little miser verse, and then we'll read from that Krishna book. Try to keep track of which one we ended on. I completely forgot. Okay, so we'll start at the bottom of page 541 tomorrow and finish up the purport. As for detachment, right? Okay. So, the miser. This is from Bhagavad. Now, we don't want to be misers, right? Kripana. Kripana means, the standard means, you get a human form of life and you don't use it for what it could be, which is self-realization. You try to enjoy sense, but you waste it, you lose it. That's a miser. Kripana. But here, this devotee prays to be a Kripana. How is that? So it says, Vichayani, Vichayani, Vichityani punah punaha, Kripanasya, Tunaniva, Tunnamani bhavantuna. Compelled to constantly collect and count his precious hoard, the miser contemplates his wealth with avaricious aims. Please bless me to become a miser who is compelled, O Lord, to constantly collect and count and contemplate your names. So greed is good, as one sage once said. That's probably before your time. Greed is good, but not greed on Wall Street. That's bad. Greed for Krishna. Lauli. That is the only price to buy pure devotional service, as Ramananda Roy said. And we'll deal with that tomorrow. It's now 8 o'clock. Thank you for listening. We will continue now with Krishna book. And we are, where are we?
We're
The end of Buddha?
47.
Still at 47. All right, let's make some progress. Yes, Uddhava
Is
still giving the message to the gopis. I think he's finishing, well, he's finished that, and he's now appreciating the glory of the gopis. Let's see, I have it bookmarked, hopefully. That much I can get him together. Yes, Krishna's message to the gopis. Okay. Well, let's read from here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, externally, Uddhava helped the gopis associate with Krishna by his conclusive instructions. So I think he's finished reading the letter. The Supreme Lord is described in the scriptures as adhokshaja, which indicates that he is beyond the perception of all material senses. Although beyond the material senses, he is present in everyone's heart. At the same time, he is present everywhere by his all-pervasive feature of Brahman. One can realize all three transcendental features of the Absolute Truth: Bhagavan, the personality of God; Paramatma, the localized supersoul; and the all-pervasive Brahman, simply by studying the condition of the gopis in their meeting with Uddhava, as described in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is said by Srinivasacharya that the 6 Goswamis were always merged in thoughts of the activities of the gopis. Lord Chaitanya has also recommended the gopis' method of worshipping the Lord as super excellent. Shukadeva Goswami, has also recommended that anyone who hears from the right source about the dealings of the gopis with Krishna and who follows the instructions laid down by the previous acharyas will be elevated to the topmost position of devotional service and be able to give up the lust of material enjoyment. This is the last verse of the Rasa Panchadhyaya. You don't even know what that is? Pancha means 5. There are 5 chapters dealing with the rasa dance. Everyone's heard of rasa dance, right? So the rasa dance are right in the middle of this 10th canto. And the last verse, Prabhupada just gave a rough translation, that anyone who hears from the right source and chants these pastimes is cured of the disease of lust. And remember, that's our arch enemy in this world, according to Krishna in the 3rd chapter. All the gopis were solaced by the instructions of Uddhava, and they requested him to stay in Vrindavan for a few days more. Uddhava agreed to their proposal and stayed with them not only for a few days, but for a few months. He always kept them engaged in thinking of the transcendental message of Krishna and his pastimes,
and the gopis felt as if they were experiencing direct association with Krishna. While Uddhava remained in Vrindavan, the inhabitants enjoyed his association. As they discussed the activities of Krishna, the days passed just like moments. Vrindavan's natural atmosphere, with the presence of the river Yamuna, its nice orchards of trees decorated with various fruits, Govardhan Hill, caves, blooming flowers, all combined to inspire Uddhava to narrate Krishna's pastimes. The inhabitants enjoyed Uddhava's association in the same way that they enjoyed the association of Krishna. Uddhava was attracted by the attitude of the gopis because they were completely attached to Krishna, and he was inspired by the gopis' anxiety for Krishna. He offered them his respectful obeisances and composed songs in praise of their transcendental qualities as follows, quote, "Among all the living entities who have accepted the human form of life, the gopis are super excellently successful in their mission. Their thought is eternally absorbed in the lotus feet of Krishna. Great sages and we ourselves also try to be absorbed in meditation on the lotus feet of Krishna, but the gopis, having lovingly accepted the Lord, are automatically accustomed to this and do not depend on any yogic practice." The conclusion is that one who has attained the gopis' condition of life does not have to take birth as Brahma or be born in a Brahmin family or be initiated as a Brahmin. Close quote. Uddhava confirmed Krishna's statement in the Gita that one who takes shelter of him for the right purpose, be that person a Shudra, a woman, or a member of a low-grade family, will attain the highest goal of life. The gopis have set the standard of devotion for the whole world. One who follows in the footsteps of the gopis by constantly thinking of Krishna can attain the highest perfectional stage of spiritual life. The gopis were born not of any highly cultured family, but of cowherd men. Yet they developed the highest love of Krishna, who is the Super Soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Supreme Brahman. For self-realization or God realization, there's no need to take birth in a high family. The only thing needed is development of ecstatic love of God. For achieving perfection in Krishna consciousness, no qualification is required other than to be constantly engaged in the loving service of Krishna, the supreme nectar, the reservoir of all pleasure. The effect of taking up Krishna consciousness is just like that of drinking nectar. With or without one's knowledge, it will act. The active principle of Krishna consciousness will equally manifest itself everywhere. It doesn't matter how and where one has taken his birth. Krishna will bestow his benediction upon anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness without any doubt. Prabhupada was once asked, "How can we know you better, Prabhupada?" And he said, "Read Krishna book." And it's passages like that. You can say this Prabhupada speaking about himself and his mission. Uddhava continued. The supreme benediction attained by the gopis, in spite of their being born in the families of cowherd men, was never attained even by the goddess of fortune herself, and certainly not by the denizens of heaven, though the bodily scent of the women there is exactly like the scent of the lotus. The gopis are so fortunate that during the Rasa Lila, Krishna personally embraced them with his arms and kissed them face to face. Certainly it's not possible for any women in the three worlds to achieve this except the gopis. Therefore, now this paragraph that I'm just going to read here is Uddhava's most famous statement, his prayer to become a little shrub of grass to be kicked by the gopis and marked with their foot dust. It had been omitted from the original printing of the Krishna book, and I restored it in 1995. So listen up. Therefore, I wish to take birth as one of the plants or creepers in Vrindavan, who are so fortunate that the gopis trample them. The gopis have so lovingly served Krishna, Mukunda himself, the giver of liberation, who is searched after by great sages and saintly persons. For his sake, they left everything, their families, their children, their friends, their homes, and all worldly connections. Uddhava appreciated the exalted position of the gopis and wished to fall down and take the dust of their feet on his head. Yet he dared not ask the gopis to offer the dust from their feet. Perhaps they would not be agreeable. Therefore, to have his head smeared with the dust of the gopis' feet without their knowledge, he desired to become only an insignificant clump of grass or herbs in the land of Vrindavan. The gopis were so much attracted to Krishna that when they heard the vibration of his flute, they instantly left their homes, families, children, honor, and feminine bashfulness and ran toward the place where Krishna was standing. They didn't consider whether they were passing over the road or through the jungles. Imperceptibly, the dust of their feet was bestowed on small grasses and herbs of Vrindavan. Not daring to place the dust of the gopis' feet on his own head in this life, Uddhava aspired to have a future birth in Vrindavan, in the position of a clump of grass or herbs. He would then be able to have the dust of the gopis' feet. Uddhava appreciated the extraordinary fortune of the gopis, who were relieved of all material pangs and anxieties by placing on their beautiful high breasts the lotus feet of Krishna, which are worshipped not only by the goddess of fortune, but by such exalted demigods as Brahma and Shiva. Okay, we will pick that up on Monday.
How many go on Monday?
Well, tomorrow we read from the Nectar Devotion. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay. How many gopis were there?
Many thousands.
Thousands?
Yeah.
So
But there are 108 chief gopis.
thousands would come to the forest in the night?
You have to give up your amazement at numbers. Because numbers sometimes they don't confuse. 30. What's King Ubersane? How many servants did Ubersane have? 30 trillion. I don't know how it computes, but there. Many. This is many. Oh. What's impossible for Krishna? He's the Supreme Personality of God. Hare Krishna. Okay. By the way, this clock is no longer fast. It's exactly accurate. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
And this goes. And these go down here.
We seem to have most,
Got it? Yeah. Okay.
you know what these go on? What were you going to say?
Yeah, well, I fixed this out on
What did you fix?
plug
Oh, you did? What was wrong?
upstairs.
The breaker upstairs. You got to show me the breaker.
Oh,
Please tell me. I cannot. I used to be a technician, you know,
yeah,
at electrical supplies.
yes.
And you get Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Can you fix this too? This is kind of shaky now. Maybe you can put something in there, make it. This thing needs to be reupholstered and everything.
Can I help?
Oh, well, what you
Do
can
it.
do is put these into the box over there. And Jamal, you and Suresh. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. I have a question. Were you here today when Leela Saw came and painted?
No.
I
I
thought,
went on party on his document.
because this wasn't for I mean, you put the letter and all that.
He did tomorrow. I feel bad.
Well, you know, I mean, I can see what's going to happen. You're going to end up doing a marathon. Is that possible?
Is he gonna put her off for the
She's gonna probably, I mean, come on, we do all this.
I don't mind doing it. It would take a lot of time. But
Did you go inside, Gita? Krishna Hari
Yeah.
Hey Krishna Karana Sandhari Apandara Vidhute Bhute Shirotika Kanta Radha Kanta Bhute Akantana Gaurani Lade Indana Krishna Bhalavate Devi Kumari Jai Jagannath, what did you do? Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Srimate Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai, Anand Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Shri Bhagavad Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Radhapur Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadvip Madhur Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Jagannath Swami ki jai. Ganga Nadi ki jai. Yamuna Nadi ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Mukti Devi ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Transcendental Book Distribution ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Samveda Bhaktivinoda Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga.
With Sri Guru and Guru.
I'm assuming the music. Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Prahlada
the cups?
I have one cup.
Okay, there's some in here.
We need 2 cups. Here we go. We're all set. Would you like some prasad? Please.
Yes, please.
Ladies first. This is the gentleman here. Who cooked? Who cooked?
And they're pretty good.
Would you like a little more? That's good for you?
Yes.
1 or 2?
One.
1 is good?
Thank you.
A little taste, a little sweet.
Okay.
How about a spoon? No spoon? Huh? Okay. A little milk? How
Okay.
about?
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Jamal!
Just some milk for me.
Just milk, well, it's in advance.
Stop taking after 6:30.
Okay. Oh, sorry. This is a picture without a handbook. Very interesting. Oh, good God.
Did Dolly tell you about her?
What happened?
She moved out of her current friend's place and she's staying with a friend in LA for 3 months, so she won't be back.
Oh, okay. All right, so I thought it was something I must have said.
No, she'll be back.
And you would like something?
Yes.
Where's the plate? Grab a plate. More? That's good. Become a yogi since you came back from one only. A little sweet?
Yeah.
One only. I'm taking the rest of it. Huh?
Go ahead. Sleep. Wake up. Oh, shit.
Oh, I'm not going to eat it all at once. I had some earlier. It was pretty good. I don't know why it's so much.
Yeah. Too much sweet. Sleep.
Yeah, too much sweet makes me sleep.
Yeah.
How about a spoon?
No spoon.
How about a fork?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now let me try this. Jamal, so did you paint it all today? You didn't paint today?
No.
Okay. It's going to be interesting tomorrow when Mara sees that